On today's episode of TFP Mini, we're finally getting into the good stuff. We're building a building. Yeah, we're building a building. Specifically, we're building an HO scale version of the food booth at the Mexico Pavilion at EPCOT. Alright, hold on a second. I know you're like, hey, TFP Mini guy, what exactly is exciting about making a tiny food booth and all that? I mean, what is that? A glorified food truck? Well, it's not really about what the item is, it's about the complexity and detail involved in it. Or at least it is for me. And this tiny little building has an insane amount of detail to model, print, and paint. On top of that, we're going to add the tiniest LED I have ever seen inside to light up the fully modeled kitchen interior. This one will be packed full of detail, and I feel confident saying it's the world's smallest and most detailed EPCOT Mexico food booth miniature. Sure, it's probably the only EPCOT Mexico food booth miniature too, but still, I mean, this is going to be super cool. Trust me. Besides, it's my favorite food booth at EPCOT, so it makes sense for me to start here. Let's do this. First up, how do you make an item to scale if you don't know the real world sizes? This is a big problem as I can't roll into Disney with a tape measure or some other measuring device. I'm sure Mickey Glove Security would roll up on me in no time if I tried. So what I'm doing is taking a lot of reference photos and having my peeps stand near things. When I get home, I can take the known sizes of my peeps and get a fairly accurate size of things. It doesn't work for everything though. For example, something like the Torii at the Japan Pavilion, we have to sort of guess as people can't get close enough to it to use them as a gauge. But with some research and reference photos and good old guessing, I can come pretty close most of the time. I hope. Using Fusion 360, I just sort of dove in and started designing the four walls. I screwed up a lot, but kept working at it. Needless to say, this took many hours for me to make. I spent more time making the simple wall with the entry door than probably the entire model. Figuring out how to easily make bricks wasn't so easy, until you know how to do it, and then it's really easy. So if I had to do it again, I could probably do it in 1/4 the time or less. You learn as you go. I also spent a lot of time designing, then doing a test print of this one little wall to really understand how small details come out in the final 3D prints. And on top of that, I bought a Bambulab A1 Mini printer with a 0.2mm print head, which is smaller than the 0.4mm print head I have on my Bambulab X1C printer. So this allows me to use the A1 for super tiny detail parts and the X1C printer for bigger parts and those that aren't so freaking tiny. And like that, a printer farm is born. And if modeling the building wasn't enough, there are a lot of supporting pieces that go with the food booth, such as potted plants, order-taking kiosks, a table that holds utensil and napkin dispensers, the menu display, shade umbrellas, there's a roof vent, the concrete slab it all goes on, and even the stanchions, which are still a work in progress. Oh, and did I mention I have to get a super tiny LED inside so it lights up? Crikey. Once the parts were modeled, it was time to 3D print them on the new A1 Mini 3D printer. This thing is amazing, by the way. If you want to get into 3D printing and don't want to spend a fortune, get yourself a Bambulab A1 Mini. You want to upgrade to the X1C down the road, but the A1 Mini, or even the regular A1, is the best place to start in 3D printing if you ask me. And you didn't ask me, so I'll get off the cross now as I'm sure you need the wood for something. The first step with my printed walls is to glue them together. Should be easy, right? Not so much. The internet lied to me telling me that CA glue, aka super glue, works great on PLA prints. It does not. Not even close. Or I'm using the wrong CA or the wrong viscosity. I don't know. I also tried hot glue, but that just makes a stringy mess on this small stuff. Epoxy glue would probably work, so I might try that in the future too for longer working time. What I do know is that Weld-On 16 acrylic plastic cement does work great. This glue, which is really a solvent cement, is good stuff, but it's stinky. The good kind of stink that probably causes cancer, but also tells you it's going to work great. This is your grandfather's glue, and that's a good thing. The issue is how fast it dries, which is really fast. So squeezing a puddle out to use dries faster than you can use the puddle. Live and learn. It also melts acrylic paint, so you really want to glue before painting parts. With the four walls glued together and various little support bits printed, like the kitchen parts, it was time to start painting. I bought one of those super cheap acrylic paint sets where you get like 100 colors for $40, and it was about as good as you can guess. Turns out that you get what you pay for. Shocker. So I bought some Vallejo acrylic paint models, which are great for detail, and I'll save the crap paint for the bigger parts. Painting stuff this small is no easy task, but I made sure to model the building with that in mind. For example, something like door trim I would bump out like 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters from the building. Then I could paint the wall up to the trim, and later paint the trim with a different color with less risk of getting the trim on the color of the wall. There was a learning curve here, but I have a good handle on this for the future. The bottom line is that painting requires practice and patience. I feel like a frickin' Navy SEAL sniper with the way I have to slow my heart rate and control my breathing as I brush the tiny details on. But how do you paint the really, really tiny stuff? For example, in the real-life building, there's some sort of mural decoration made out of 4x4-inch tiles that are painted with a design in a picture. How does one model artwork when it's that small? because 4 by 4 inches in HO scale is just over 1 by 1 millimeter. Okay, so after some research, I found this Canon selfie printer. It's a dye sublimation printer, which uses the same process as an online photo printing place would, so it's really nice quality. It's limited to 4 by 6 inch photo sizes, or smaller, but that's enormous in my HO world. So I grabbed one for about $120 or so, and I'm blown away how great this little thing is. So I'll use this for things like the menus and artwork, etc. I want to model as much as I possibly can, but this comes in handy when modeling isn't an option. With so many tiny parts going into a tiny model, there's a lot to hand paint here. I did discover that using an airbrush to apply primer makes a world of difference. The Bambulab printers make amazing 3D prints with layer lines you can barely notice, but on small scale items they sometimes show up. Airbrushing primer eliminates most of them, and then the final color coat finishes them off and makes them look really smooth. In most cases, you wouldn't be able to tell these were done on an FDM printer and would easily think these came off a resin printer. At some point in the project, you realize you need other bits for the model. Oh, buildings have floors, right, yeah, I forgot about that initially, so time to add that in. A roof, yep, better get on that. Oh, and the roof has curved clay tiles, great, of course it does. Better figure out how to model curved clay tiles in Fusion. With most things, it's easier to model than you'd think once you know how. The building and all of its supporting pieces need a cement pad to sit on, so I modeled that and tried to match up the expansion joints in the concrete, just like they are in real life. Thanks, Google Earth. And just when you think this model will never be finished, all of a sudden, it's just done. Then you remember you told yourself, oh, it must light up inside. Ah, frick. Alright, back to Amazon for tiny LEDs, battery holders, wire connectors. Nothing clenches a butthole more than drilling a super tiny hole in the bottom of an otherwise 100% finished and one-of-a-kind model you just spent days and days making, so you can get a tiny LED inside. But it all worked out and I learned a ton. With any luck, you learned something or are at least inspired to make something of your own. For now, and as my favorite YouTuber likes to say, let's have a look at the final result.